Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update for the 18th of June, 2023. Let's get straight into it and look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. Russian figures are completely fanciful, which is why I don't report them, and I've explained why they're fanciful and how they're fanciful. Okay, Ukrainian figures are somewhat more accurate. We look at the trends. So what's happened yesterday, 650 liquidated personnel. That is there or thereabouts for the last couple of days. We've seen it tick up from a lower number that had gone down from a higher number right at the beginning of the counter-offensive. There could be a little bit of a lull. It's the weekend time, but I don't think so. I think this is pretty much par for the course at the moment. 7 tanks, 23 APVs. That's a large number of infantry fighting vehicles, APCs and whatnot. 13 artillery systems, 1 MLRS. So that's a fairly expensive day for the Russians. There have been reports, and we'll talk about this in a little while, that it's pretty expensive for the Ukrainians as well. Differing claims have been made. I've seen some really unverified claims by Russians, which is why I'm not reporting them. When it's just a screenshot of some text without even the attribution of who said that, it's just like, well, that's could come from anywhere. So I'm not going to report that, but there might be some heavy Ukrainian losses as well, which is what you'd expect in an attack, right? I mean, think about D-Day. Okay, helicopters. 2 helicopters lost. That's a big loss. There's been talk about the Russians using a lot more helicopters on the southern front line in the Zaporizhia Oblast and Kherson Oblast as well, and that will result in them losing more. It's just that's the nature of the beast. What you'd want is them to lose enough crews that actually they are unable to utilize their helicopter capacity effectively. 7 drones, and then going on 14 vehicles and fuel tanks, 2 pieces of special equipment. Fairly average in some categories, but 2 helicopters is definitely a sore loss for the Russians. 23 APCs as well. There's a number of bits of footage of APCs being captured by the Ukrainians. Right, the intelligence update from the UK says the following: in recent days, heavy fighting has continued with most intense combat focused on Zaporizhia Oblast, Western Donetsk Oblast, and around Bakhmut. Nothing we didn't already know. In all these areas, Ukraine continues to pursue offensive operations and has made small advances. Yes. In the south, Russian forces are often conduct relatively effective defensive operations. Both sides are suffering high casualties, with Russian losses likely the highest since the peak of the battle for Bakhmut in March. So this is a case of seeing high Russian casualties, but also the acceptance that it's going to be fairly expensive in terms of human life for the Ukrainians. Remember, these numbers refer to humans. So here we have the confirmation one, another verification that the Russians lost 2 helicopters. Here we have a number of drones also taken out in the evening before. 12 drones are hit, 5 of them attack types, 4 Shahed and 1 Lancet. The rest are reconnaissance drones. So the Air Force has been pretty busy in Ukraine. And this is just to confirm that those Russian helicopters are causing problems. This is some footage of Ka-52s taking out Ukrainian pieces of equipment. We know that these helicopters are causing problems. That is one presumes tanks or IFVs there being taken out by these helicopters at a distance that they can't be hit, often by manpads in return. So they're an issue. Now we have seen, and this is worth dwelling on for a little bit. So this is just a bit of a montage of 10th Mountain Assault Brigade striking Russian hideouts with first-person view drones. We've seen a lot of FPV drones take out vehicles. Now we're starting to see, and we have seen this in the past, but we're starting to see this a lot more in the southern offensive. There are a number of hideouts or a number of trenches, of course. We're starting to see FPV drones used against them. There have been some claims that I've read that the Ukrainians are saying the Russian hideouts are of a better quality than the Ukrainian ones. They're built better. They are undetectable by drones. Thermal imaging and whatnot. And this is certainly an issue for the Ukrainians. So lots of footage here to suggest that they are hitting these hideouts with these RPG warheads on the drones. Don't know how much damage they do. Don't know whether they do what is intended if these hideouts are indeed built much further under the ground than previously. The Russians have had many months to build up these defenses, right? And they are, you would imagine, they are going to be pretty well built. Let's talk about it being rather like Vietnam, etc., etc. So yeah, okay, let's go on to some serious hits that have taken place. This is at Henichesk. So that is on my map here. Henichesk is there, just north of Crimea. In fact, this isn't in Henichesk. It's in Rykova, which is just a little bit north there. Really, really significant hit. This lots of video footage of this from different angles. I just show some of the cooking off. I think it's basically a big ammunition dump that has been hit with lots of cooking off, secondary explosions going off in the area. And yeah, a lot of talk about this. In fact, the Air Force has already kind of admitted this out in the open, like made a statement about this, I think. So this is a really significant hit. Lots more. It's already turning up on the firm's data, which is the NASA wildfire heat signature data. So that is how significant that one is. But yeah, lots of hits all around. We've got hits in Skadovsk, hits in Alchevsk, HIMARS, hits in Holivka, multiple hits there. Strikes in Luzerna, strikes in Berdyansk, and I think that's the roundup I've got there. Yeah, and oil refinery in Bryansk in Russia. So some of those places, just to give you an understanding where they are. So we talked about near Henichesk. There's Skadovsk there. Luzerna is just there. So this is in the Kherson Oblast in the occupied region. Then we had Berdyansk being hit there. I presume places like Tokmak and Melitopol are still getting a little bit of attention. You got Holivka there and Alchevsk there. I think they were the names of all the places. So that is the Ukrainian HIMARS and Storm Shadow crews have been pretty busy. Okay, the oil refinery in Bryansk, as I mentioned, drones attacked the Druzhba oil refinery overnight. The alleged 3 drones were shot down by the Russian air defense, accusing Ukraine of the attack. And then just another hit here this is always sad when this happens. Russian forces shelled the village of Huryev Kozachok in Kharkiv Oblast. Additionally, an anti-tank guided missile hit a civilian car carrying 4 people. They died on the spot. That's an ATGM. I mean, goodness me. So that must be a village very close to the Russian border up in the Kharkiv area there. Okay, so as we go on, we'll look at the front line very quickly. It's pretty much what was going on yesterday. If you remember, we have activity. Oops, sorry. On my map, there's activity, possibly some taking place in Vuhledar. We've got Bakhmut further to the north as well. Great time for my maths to run out of battery. Right, so we've got activity in the Velika Novosilka area of Vuhledar, Velika Novosilka, and then south of Hlyapole towards this towards Drozhnianka, sorry. And then you have a lot of activity south of Orikhiv, bit of a spoonerism there. Malotokam action south of there, so towards Robertone, and this is where the Ukrainians have potentially lost the largest amount of their equipment and possibly troops, not sure, but I'll talk about that in a second. And then Lobkov area here, particular concentration on this village of Pietzke, and then Zerebianki again. Reporting from Ukraine did a whole video on what is taking place there. So, according to a few of these sources, operational situation in the Vasilivsky direction, which is in that area I was just talking about, Lobkove, at 4:20 yesterday, the armed forces of Ukraine completely drove out the Russian troops from the village of Pietikatki. Fighting continues on the outskirts on several fronts. So that is the claim that Pietikatki village is liberated. Disclaimer, unconfirmed information, says Max23. The occupiers retreated from the important settlement of Pietikatki in the Zaporizhia direction. The Ukrainians are drawing up large reserves, and the capture of Pietzke provides an opportunity to advance to Vasilivka, is the Russian claim. Okay, so the Russians are worried about Vasilivka, and I've talked about previously how this is one of the three kind of main areas of attack from the Ukrainians in this area in terms of the counteroffensive, and it provides a very important logistical node here that would be the westernmost advancement, I think, for that for a Zaporizhia counteroffensive. No reports says clarification: Pietzke is under Ukrainian control but not fully cleared yet. Fighting reached the outskirts of Zerebianki while simultaneously attacking Luhove. So Luhove is not Lukove, so Lukove, sorry, Zer, Luhove, Zer. So we perhaps got attack activity near Luhove, Zerebianki, and Pietzke. So I haven't changed my maps yet. I'll be doing that afterwards. There's perhaps activity around, I think, this area as well. We'll see. Anyway, no report says I have added logical targets on the map, blocking supply lines to Kamyanska and one through Horove to Nestaryanka. So, yeah, this is where no reports thinks the attack might go. If we move further to the east, here we have advances at Robertyrna. This is the Russians claiming that the enemy is leading a powerful offensive. Having reached the trenches, he's trying to break through and wedge himself into our fighting. The order of the Zaporizhia front. It's a Google Translate, so it's a bit dodgy. Line of defense 58 of the army of Volcano Verbovo. Ours have left one advanced position. The enemy, he went to her, and now he is covered with all the guns. The enemy is trying to break through further. Tanks came to the aid of our infantry company tactical groups of the armed forces of Ukraine with armored vehicles. They continue to attack. Massive fires being conducted on them. In other words, there's a lot of activity going on in the Robertyrna area. So this is further to the east, south of Orikhiv. So this is that area there, and there are some claims that that settlement itself is under a lot of pressure. Heavy fighting in this area tonight, per Russian reports. So I'm going to show you these maps. It's quite useful. At the moment, unclear what is going on, but there's confirmation that Ukrainians have now occupied previously held positions by the Russians. So this is Robertyrna, and fighting as well seen in Verbove. So that is just here. A lot of activity in this area would imply that the Ukrainians have advanced from the front lines up here. This is a grey zone, the front line of Andrew Perpetua, the pro-Ukrainian mapper, and Syriac Maps pro-Russian mapper. That if there's activity taking place down here, then the Ukrainians definitely have advanced. And I just wanted to show you this map because it shows you how tricky it is going to be. So this is the trenches as mapped by what's his name? I can't remember. Brain is gone. Brady F. Frick, that's it. So he's, as you can see, shown that there are many lines of trenches here, and it's going to be this such a difficult area to break through. You've got 4 lines of defense effectively just between Robertyrna and Verbova. So yeah, really, really difficult. It's going to be slow going, and this is what we're seeing. It is slow going and difficult advancement to be had here. But then I wonder, is this the best place to throw your attack at, considering the amount of trenches around here? Are there weaker spots to the west or to the east? And they would know where all these trenches are. This is open source information. The Ukrainians would have even better understanding of where all the defenses are, and yet they are attacking there. So I don't know. I guess. Well, I don't know. I'm no military expert, but they have lost a lot of equipment around that area. This is Evil Gerken saying, the Russian war criminal and former FSB Spetsnaz Igor Strelkov Gerken predicts Russian collapse if Ukraine is able to break through the current front line, which he calls the thinnest thread on which everything hangs for Russia. So there's a lot of talk about actually they've called up the reserves. The intention for the Ukrainians here might well be to use up all the Russian reserves in this offensive, in this kind of light offensive period, and then it will just be easier to get through the defenses. It's just attriting, chewing up the reserves, the Russians, as they are sending in their troops to defend particular areas of attack, and that means that these trench lines all around here are then much more thinly manned, and it will be easier to advance through. That is one theory, and Evil Gerken says that if that happens, if they get through that first line of defense, then there will be trouble. It depends what you define the first line of defense. There's been talk about the Ukrainians breaking the first line of defense up here, which is kind of true because the first line of defense wasn't in the trenches. It was just a line of defensive positions, I guess, and towns that the Russians occupied, and they kind of broken through that, and then they're getting towards the first line of trenches. Whether you call that the first line of defences or not, I suppose is kind of semantic. Right, let's move on from the front. So there was lots of activity, not a great amount of movement on the map, but there is slow progress for the Ukrainians. Okay, moving on to odds and sods here. The interesting news, if true, so this might not be true, the commander of the occupiers, the Russian MOD, established a new procedure for the treatment of wounded Russian servicemen, according to which only officers are subject to the evacuation to the Russian Federation. And this is what the Ukrainian MOD is saying. The decision will spread like wildfire through among Russian troops, who will be even more likely to surrender to the Ukrainians if they get wounded, to ensure that they receive the medical care they need, says this particular open source intelligence source. Some people only focus on major battlefield victories as a sign of success in the war. In a war. In fact, it is the small details like this that speak volumes about the condition of the Russian military and its ability to properly support its forces 16 months into the 3-day special operation. And I think that's true, actually. There's something to be said about concentrating on little things. What do Russia say here? What do they do here? Why they're making that particular little law? And it's reflecting a malaise behind the scenes in the Russian military. Another thing that's worthy of note, Russian barges is seen under the Kerch Bridge today, possibly indicating continued work and/or structural inspection. Unconfirmed reports that some of the supporting columns may have cracks. I showed you photographic evidence of one or two of the big supporting columns with cracks down them. Now, that could have been photoshopped. It might not have been kosher, but that is a claim that's out there, and it could be that the Kerch Bridge is under greater long-term structural, threat. This is Rebar, and I don't know how important this is, whether this actually says anything. So the creator of Rebar, a military blog, is believed to be directly communicating with the creator of pro-Ukrainian TrueHeart channel. The conversation was allegedly accidentally leaked during his live stream, so it just came up on his screen as a live stream. Vladimir Solovyov announced no Rebar daily summary today on his show. Rebar is still posting on his main Telegram channel. So that was leaked during his live stream on Solovyev's show. So that is possibly a little bit controversial. Why is he in conversation with one of the main, really important or quite famous pro-Ukrainian channel? However, that pro-Ukrainian channel has itself been suspended for showing missile hits on, I think, Ukrainian positions too quickly, and that there is a rule that you can't show Ukrainian hits in Ukraine. You're not allowed to. Russian hits in Ukraine. You're not allowed to. They're quite tight on that: operational security, propaganda, narrative control, all that kind of stuff. But they do that, and I think they've got into trouble for doing that, not only because it's against the law, so they're suspended, but also because Russians have then used that. It's uploaded so quickly. I think they pay viewers to upload really quickly, and that allows the Russians to then correct their fire. I mean, it's that quick. So anyway, I don't know whether any of that has any importance here at all. I don't know what any of this kind of really means, but it's just quite interesting. I mean, there's lots of talk going on down below saying, well, kind of, so what, or this is bad, or so on and so forth. People are reading this in myriad different ways, as you can imagine, but it's quite interesting that is the case. Okay, we move on to military aid. There's not a huge amount to be said here. First of all, I just want to talk about that footage of Shoigu and the walking around that Russian tank factory and whatnot. There's been quite a bit of commentary on this. Here in The Guardian, there's an article saying Russian forces face a shortage of tanks as counter-offensive creeps forward. Sergei Shoigu, on a visit to a military factory in western Siberia, said that the production of armoured vehicles needed to be increased as Kiev talked up the heavy losses being inflicted on the occupying enemy. So this is an admission that actually they need hardware and they need it pretty quickly. An increase in the manufacture of tanks was said by Shoigu to be necessary, quote, to satisfy the needs of Russian forces carrying out the special military operation, in comments that echoed those of Vladimir Putin earlier in the week. Russia's president had said that the military was lacking sufficient, quote, high precision ammunition, communications equipment, aircraft, drones, and so on. Pretty much most things, while insisting that Ukraine had faced catastrophic losses in the first 2 weeks of its counteroffensive. Okay, so this is then, referencing the visit of Shoigu to this factory, which had a lot of people saying, well, I was a bit dubious about this, right? Saying, do they really have this much kit, right? Is that a factory? If that's an assembly plant, where's the equipment to move that stuff? That looks like effectively it's being warehoused and not being worked on. They've suddenly got a bunch of people to work on it while Shoigu comes there. And then there's all this stuff outside. Why would you store stuff outside? Why is there stuff outside and not already at the front line? Is it stored outside because actually you can't move it? They don't have the parts to have it. So you get all this kind of stuff goes on in my head as I try and wonder how problematic this might be for the Ukrainians. All of these trucks, like they're rows and rows of these trucks. Why are they not on the front line? What are they doing there for him to go and look at? So that just tells me that they probably then you have him looking under the bonnet of one of these things, like playing around. Look there, you're like, well, that's probably why they're not on the front because they got Shoigu to have a look at it and see if he can fix it. Yeah, we don't know what's going on here. They're all missing parts. So, and some of these are just really old bits of kit. Just so I'm really dubious that actually any of this is particularly useful. But some people like Smart Ukrainian Cat, different from Special Ukrainian Cat, lots of cat-based Ukrainian. That's special Kherson cat, isn't it? I don't know what it is about cats. Anyway, everyone paid so much attention to the counter-thermal coat and a roof screen, all combined officially called the roof. Much more important information has been stated, however. They briefly mention 153 T80 BVM to be delivered according to the plan. We can suppose that that's their annual plan. We don't know at all whether that's something they are doing and can do. That roughly matches their T90 production plan. Another 120 to 150 pieces then add at least the same quantity of T72 and 260 T62. That's 800 tanks per year. So this guy's worried, but I don't know that that's at all justified. Like, where's the evidence they're actually producing those? You can argue as much as you want, but Russian defense industry is increasing its tempo. As one of the examples, they've launched a strategic state program worth a couple of $1 billion on the development of the drone industry. They will never run out of components if China is on their side. But I don't know that is. You can definitely take that from this. As someone else says, don't fall for Russia's latest con, that it's making lots of shiny new hardware. Shoigu visited one of the many bases storing vast numbers of old, often unusable hardware. Some are hosed down for the camera, and a small number are refurbished. Pics from Omsk, Siberia, where Shoigu is said to have visited. And someone else says, this is Omsk, Siberia, right? Any vehicles left out in the open like this are just going to deteriorate really, really quickly. Just outdoor storage of ferrous material like equipment in the middle of Siberia, not to mention the effect of it on engine and transmission seals. What a joke. And so, there's a lot of people pouring kind of scorn on this, whilst there are some people also saying this is a bit of a worry for Ukraine. I would err on the side of I'm not as worried as I could be by seeing that amount of kit. I just think, if they got it, it'd be on the front line. Denmark is ready to give F-16s to Ukraine if the US approves. Acting Danish Defense Minister Poulsen said on the 17th that Denmark could donate fighter jets to Ukraine, but only if the US gives a green light, which I'm sure that has all will happen. The Belgian Ministry of Defense reports that it will hand over the first batch of 40 to 50 M113 armored personnel carriers. So these are the old American ones to Ukraine after modernization has finished. So they are modernizing them. So Belgium is giving over 50. The first 40 will be handed over after modernization. Don't know what's happening to the other 10. And this is pretty cool. So this, I think, the quote from No Reports is, "Well, hello there. Who's up for the challenge?" That word is quite important. So this is pretty cool footage, and it just shows, I guess, that hey, what do we have here? It shows that perhaps the challengers are nearby. So that looks like a Ukrainian former British challenger, if my identification is correct. And that would excite some people who are looking forward to seeing them do their stuff. But it is pretty attritional and difficult along that front line in Zaporizhia. Right, moving on to there's only a couple of geopolitical pieces today. A new wave of decommunization begins in Kazakhstan. So the Kazakh authorities must stop using the names of figures of the Soviet Union to name objects and create a list of their own prominent figures, said the president of the republic, Kasim-Jomart Tokayev. It is, quote, "It is necessary to stop the practice of naming various objects after figures of the Soviet period, whose biographies are purposefully mythologized in favor of someone's personal interests and preferences," he stressed. Absolutely bang on here. Earlier, Tokayev demanded to stop erecting monuments to figures of the Soviet period in the republic. Before that, Kazakhstan's deputy prime minister, Altai Kulginov, reported a plan to change about 3,000 ideologically outdated topographic names in the republic. We've seen this in Ukraine, interestingly. There's been a really big move to decommunize Ukraine after 2014, particularly, uh, as a way of throwing off the shackles of Russian imperialism, but also just asserting their own independence, I guess, but also their own identity. And Kazakhstan doing that is a sign that Eurasia is. I mean, the US, China, and Russia are going to be battling for kind of geopolitical control of these nations in a really serious way. I think the next 10 years is going to be fascinating. Not only here, there was talk about. I probably should have this in the geopolitics sector section. There's talk about Japan, obviously. Lots going on there with regard to their strategic positioning and their army, but also lots of nations in Asia with regard to you know whose sphere of influence are they going to be under? Is it the China Russia axis? Is it the US hegemony? Or are they going to be more independent? You've got India there and a load of nations. So I think there's going to be geopolitical wrangling. With regard to you have Taiwan, obviously, but also these Eurasian nations. I think the whole of Asia is going to be a hotbed of geopolitical machinations over the next decade or so. So, Euromaidan Press reports Joe Biden saying, so there's this talk, and I do understand Joe Biden saying this, and I'll explain why. So, Ukraine will and can join NATO, but it's not going to be automatic, US President Joe Biden said. So, there was this claim that Biden said, I'm not against them joining quickly type thing to NATO, but I think he's had to issue a corrective here. So he says they got to meet the same standards. I'm not going to make it easier for Ukraine to join NATO, Joe Biden said. And that sounds like pretty harsh, isn't it, when you're pro-Ukrainian? But you've got to, and this same has happened with the EU. So Zelensky and Ukraine are really good at pushing the narrative in their favor. And they'll say, "Hey, we're going to join the EU, we're going to join NATO. It's going to be really quick." And then really pro Ukrainian people are like, "Yeah, let's make that happen." And there's a lot of will for that to happen. But the problem is you've got a lot of nations who want to join NATO or who want to join the EU who are like, "Hang on, they can't just bypass. If we have to jump through all these hoops, you can't say they don't have to jump through these hoops." So it's really difficult to balance the needs and desires of other nations as well as Ukraine. Yes, we want Ukraine to join really quickly, but if we bend all the rules, then that's double standards, and we'd have to bend all the rules for all these other nations, and that's really problematic because then they don't meet the requisite requirements to join. And actually, it's the same for Ukraine. Like if you bend the rules and say they can join quicker, then actually they're not in the right good and proper place to join, as in they haven't jumped through the requisite hoops. That means that they are qualified to join NATO or qualified to join the EU. So it's that difficult balancing balancing act of we need them to join quicker, we want them to join quicker, but we also want them to have all these robust things put in place so that they can join as well. Anyway, that's my point. So this could be an element of him having to say that, but actually behind the scenes things might be different. I don't know. This is politics, real politics, and all that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate you being here to watch the news with me. Someone said yesterday, it would be really great if you can make these a lot quicker. These news pieces. And like, mates, I can't like ignore a bunch of news. It's like reporting for Ukraine, doing it in 5 minutes. Yeah, that's not news. That's one battle going on in one place on the front line. That's why that's 5 minutes. Right. I'm doing this is the geopolitics of the whole of Ukraine and in the context of the rest of the world. And then my front lines are the whole of the front line. And then, so that's why they're longer. I know if some people hate that, I'm sorry. It's what I'm like. It's what it is. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.